Welcome back to this second half of the hour for Hebrew Nation Radio and also on YouTube uh, online. We, in the first half, were discussing a new book that I'm writing, Megaquake 2023, with three timelines and five when-then signs that signal apocalyptic times. Well, not sure I covered all of it, and I will mention just the three timelines now. The first being the similarity between the U.S. and Egypt. Egypt, as you know, enslaved Israel and threw their babies in the river, and America has enslaved most people in alcohol, tobacco, drugs, even medical care is a form of bondage, with having to come back every few weeks or months, whatever, for prescription drugs that have adverse drug effects and are a leading cause of death. Have a website, leading cause of death, prescriptiondrugs.com, you might like to look at. But the point is that we are in bondage as a nation to negative lifestyles, making drugs and other things that seem to be necessary when in reality it's not God's plan at all. And He's going to free us to something better, as He freed the Israelites in Egypt. He took them to a covenant and later said, I'm married to you. And that's how the wedding parables fit. We can have the opportunity of a covenant relationship which through the last 7 years will protect us. When God made a covenant with Israel, He drove out the Canaanite. He protected them as they went to the promised land. And we can have that protection too in the end time when it's going to be death or persecution to be in America. God said He's going to make a full end of all other nations. He doesn't mean America will be okay. It probably is like the Babylon's head of gold, first one to go, as the bear, Russia, in Daniel 7th chapter comes second after the lion with eagle's wings, probably representing the UK lion with eagle's wings, US. Then comes the bear, and we are hearing a few growls from the bear currently. Coming events cast their shadow before, probably. And anyway, we need to see how Revelation answers Daniel. And we talked about Daniel 8th chapter and how that is at the time of the end. We might wonder why or we don't see more of some familiar things in the book of Revelation. It seems so odd. Well, my book titled Megaquake notices the fact that there are 4 ways of encoding an earthquake in the book of Revelation, so that we don't see it, but it is really a bigger deal than we thought. In the first half hour we quoted Proverbs 25 verse 2, that it's the glory of God to conceal a matter. Well, it's concealed by encoding that earthquake 4 different ways. And yet God wants to reveal it. He says in Amos 3:7 He won't do anything without revealing it. And the next verse is an encoding of the earthquake. It says, the lion has roared, who will not fear? Well, the lion's roar is the earthquake. Why? Because when Muslims take the city of Jerusalem next year in the spring, it says the Lord will roar, the heavens and earth will shake. That's a big earthquake if the heavens and earth shake. And it's in connection, is from Jerusalem. Day of the Lord is the context of Joel 3:16 and also Zechariah 14:1 and 2. When day of the Lord comes and nations gather against Jerusalem to battle, the timing, day of the Lord, is in both of those passages. So you kind of connect the dots a little bit and assume that roar will be God's way of straightening the issue out. Muslims have a mosque that says Allah has no son, and they will be celebrating until the lions roar, when all of a sudden they will not be celebrating. They will flee. They know they don't belong there. So anyway, the point is, though, that this encoding of the earthquake obscures the fact of where it is and how. And we might wonder, where are we in the book of Revelation? Well, I'm going to share with you in this remaining minutes, which is about 20 left, 7 areas where we are in the book of Revelation because we are preceding the earthquake. Uh, okay, the first place that we find this in the book of Revelation is Revelation 1:10. When John heard a great voice as of a trumpet, he turned to look. He was startled, really, probably, because it was a huge earthquake. But the next words are, I am Alpha and Omega, the first and the last. Well, those words are the basis of a rule of first use that I was taught in school, maybe 60 some years ago, because if Christ is the Word, He is first and last. If you go to where a word or phrase is first found, it is consistent with the last one because He's consistent with Himself and the meaning. And the point is, where do you hear a trumpet first in the Bible? We just mentioned Revelation 1:10, a great voice as of a trumpet, but where do you first find a trumpet? It's at Exodus 19th chapter when God came down on the Mount Sinai, and it was a mini judgment day. The mountain shook, fire and smoke. People were afraid. They didn't want that kind of confrontation, and Judgment Day is not what we're looking for either, really. But yet, if we understand it, judges in the Bible were deliverers. Gideon was a deliverer. Samson was a deliverer. God delivered Daniel out of bad situation because Daniel and his friends were faithful to God. And they said, King, you can throw us in the burning fire furnace if you want, but we're not going to bow down. And the king was so furious that he had them thrown in, and even the guards died. But Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, when the king looked in, he saw a fourth likened to the Son of God. And king became converted at that point. So I wish the devil would become converted too. He wants to burn us. But anyway, it won't happen with the devil. And we're facing serious times ahead. But the idea is that we can be there for God if we're faithful, and He will protect us, be delivered. As Judgment Day. But Judgment Day will also be huge for people that aren't looking for God, and serious loss, in my opinion. So let's just think about this. Also in Revelation 1, besides verse 10, verse 15 is an encoded earthquake when John heard a voice of many waters, okay, and he was called to be a prophet. He was told to write what you saw, which is past, write what is, which are the 7 churches, and write what is to come, which is, starting with chapter 4, after the 7 churches. Those are the things that shall be hereafter. So what's coming, the earthquake, will separate past from present and future. It will be a big event, okay, bigger than we now currently think of, and it will cause people to be afraid. It's in Amos 3:7, the Lord won't do anything without revealing it. The lion has roared, who will not fear? That's verse 8. So everybody basically will fear God at that point. It's the first angel's message of Revelation 14, verse 7. Fear God, give glory to Him, time of His judgment is come. And it will apply to the last 7 years, when judgments fall on transgressors. But if we seek harmony with God, we can be protected, and especially if we're watching on that eve of Passover when it all starts. So, and we talked about that the first half. All right, so that's 2 encodings, and I want to prove to you that the voice of many waters is a call to be a prophet, because if you go to Isaiah 5, verse 30, there is a roaring of lions and a roaring of the sea, and the next verse, chapter 6, verse 1, is about the year that Isaiah died, I saw the Lord. And verse 4 says, the posts of the door moved at the voice of him that cried. That was an earthquake. And it clearly says so in Zechariah 14, verse 5. It says, you'll flee as you fled from before the earthquake in the days of Uzziah. That was the king when, in the year that Uzziah died, Isaiah saw the Lord high and lifted up, and the Lord asked, who will go for us? And Isaiah said, Here am I, send me. He volunteered. And if we can volunteer, if we can be ready, if we can be like Luke says, watching for him on the eve of Passover in Luke 12:36, watch, uh, uh, be like men that wait for their Lord when he comes from the wedding and knocks, that we may open immediately. Blessed are those servants whom his Lord finds watching. He will gird himself, make them sit down to eat, and serve them. Personal opportunity, like the disciples maybe, because that's what he did for them. Okay, imagery similar. So huge opportunity for us to be prophets in the end time. And in Revelation 11:3, he is going to give power to us, I believe, if we are watching and ready and seeking it. He says, I will give power to my two witnesses. Really, those are the two olive trees, Old and New Testament. The oil from them flows into the lamps, and we can be the lamps, so to speak. And it says they have the power to shut the heavens and turn water to blood. Well, that's what Moses and Elijah did. Moses turned water to blood. Elijah shut the heavens, and we can have that kind of power. But it also is calling us to a role like Elijah, where Christ said in Matthew 17, verse 11, that before he comes again, Elijah must come first and restore all things. So we have a huge task to restore all things, and I believe that it's involved in the covenant that we make to be his. Okay, it's God made a covenant with Israel at Sinai, but he got an ignorant bride that worshipped a calf 40 days later. And this must not happen to Christ, and it's involved in an understanding of the wedding covenant that we can make and the role of Elijah to restore all things. We see that Elijah comes in Malachi 4 and 5 in the context of remember the law of Moses with the statutes and judgments. Behold, I send you Elijah. And those statutes and judgments have a sevenfold emphasis in Ezekiel 20, verse 11 to 24. And so the point is that things that have a sevenfold emphasis are for end times, like 7 churches, 7 seals, 7 trumpets, 7 thunders. A sevenfold emphasis fits with the covenant we need to make. Things that have a sevenfold emphasis. I'll give you. We mentioned statutes 7 times are found in the book of Ezekiel 20, verses 11 to 24, and Sabbaths. They're linked to Sabbaths. And God gave Israel 7 annual holy convocations. And those are examples of topics that need to be restored, but mainline churches, not interested. They just want Sunday or Sabbath even. Seventh-day Adventists, they don't see the need for a feast days. The Seventh-day Adventist Church, sadly, I come from that background, is siding with the papacy that abolished what they think are Jewish festivals. Well, God doesn't call them Jewish festivals. He says they're my feasts in Leviticus 23, verse 2. And the seventh-day Sabbath is the first of those feasts. They honor that one, but don't honor the yearly Sabbaths, in spite of the fact that their prophet, Ellen White, spoke for them. I'll give you a couple examples. In Christ's Object Lessons, page 34, she said, the whole Jewish economy is full of instruction for us. Its impressive ceremonies were designed to teach the people that at the time appointed, one would come to whom that ceremony pointed. And in her book, Great Controversy, page 399, last line on the page, if you have the traditional copies, it says, as Christ died as the Passover lamb on Passover, in like manner, the types that relate to the second advent must be fulfilled at the time pointed out in the symbolic service. And so that means those feast days are important to us, and we'll have fulfillments then. And she also says in her last book, Prophets and Kings, page 678, in the time of the end, every divine institution will be restored. Well, did God institute them originally? Yes. Do we want to restore them, or do we side with the papacy and the abominations that church has wrought on the world with its change of calendar and Sabbath to Sunday and pagan holidays, etc.? Well, enough of that kind of angst, but let's push on here. we need to see that we can be God's people in God's time at the end time. And the places where we are now in Revelation, I'm just started with Revelation 1:10, the voice of a great trumpet, Revelation 1:15, the sound of many waters. The next encoding is, behold, I stand at the door and knock. That knock is how Laodicea ended. It was an earthquake around 63 AD. So in the wedding parable of Luke, when it says, be ready when I come and knock, I think Loma Linda's going to get it, because they hijacked her school to teach pharmacology, and God never wanted that. She didn't want it. She was trying to teach layman natural remedies. And so basically, in for tough times ahead, when buildings great and small are going to be falling to the ground. That's in her book, Volume 9 of the Testimonies, page 92, 93. She said it seemed the judgment day had come. Well, judgment begins at the house of God. In a general way with the U.S., because of its profession to be a godly nation, it gets it first. With the San Andreas Fault, I think, and Loma Linda sitting on the end of it. L.A. will get it with Hollywood, and for all their exporting of sin to the world with every kind of negative lifestyle you can imagine. And so that's number 3 encoding. Number 4, the earthquake is encoded in Revelation 6:1. When John heard thunder, it was one of the 4 beasts saying, come and see. If you look at verse 3, it says second beast. Verse 5 says third beast. Verse 7 says fourth beast. So really the first beast was a lion in Revelation 4:7, Lion of Judah in Revelation 5:5. And when John heard thunder, it was the roar of the lion. We said that the roar, the Lord will roar, heavens and earth will shake, Joel 3:16. So yes, earthquake, and it will initiate the 7 seals. When John heard thunder, it was one of the 4 beasts saying, come and see. It's an invitation to come and examine that white horse, a message of truth for the end time. Understand what those truths are. It's the 7 topics that are obscured by most mainline denominations as they've gone along with changing God's name to Lord. I grew up thinking Lord was God's name and God was Lord's name, back and forth. But those are titles, not names. And a covenant, we need a covenant relationship, statutes, judgments, Sabbaths, including the annual Sabbaths, etc. Well, I won't go into that right now, but the idea is that earthquake is encoded as thunder in Revelation 6:1. It is plainly stated in Revelation 8:5, where there are lightnings, voices, thunderings, and an earthquake, and the 7 angels with the 7 trumpets prepare to sound. And then the first angel sounds, and all the green grass on the earth is burned up. I personally believe that's the economy, because James 1:9-11 likens rich men to grass. As the flower of the grass, so shall the rich man fade. And when the grass is burned up, it doesn't mean the rich men are dead. They just aren't rich anymore. No more riches. Economy is blown. We're all level, and they won't like that too well, I think. But anyway, that's what's coming, I believe, after the earthquake. And I believe it's at the Feast of Trumpets when the first trumpet sounds. That's Rosh Hashanah, 7th month, first day. And we saw an example of that in 2008 when I happened to see the new moon in the sky that night, evening, and for 10 days the stock market crashed with a recession beginning in 2008. So yeah, it can happen that way. And I would say the next encoding of the earthquake is in Revelation 10:3, where a mighty angel comes down and cries mightily as a lion roars. Well, we've already said the lion's roar is the earthquake. And then the 7 thunders utter their voice. Well, we might wonder what these 7 thunders are. I believe based on 1 Samuel 2, verse 10, it's Hannah's prayer that she said, the Lord will roar from heaven or thunder from heaven and exalt the horn of his anointed. Well, we can be his anointed, and but the roar is the earthquake, and or the thunder, and we might wonder what are these. The when he exalts the horn of his anointed, what is that? Well, there are 7 horns in Daniel 8, and the ram has 2 horns, the goat has 1 horn. The ram's horns get broken first, then the goat's horn gets broken, and then 4 more spring up. And it says toward the 4 winds, which suggests in Revelation, in Daniel, toward the 4 winds. In Daniel's 7th chapter, there are 4 beasts: a lion with eagle's wings, a bear, and I believe the lion with eagle's wings is a U.S.-UK alliance. Bear is Russia. The leopard with 4 heads could be economic forces like China, North Korea, South Korea, Japan. Not sure just how that plays out, but the last one I'm sure is the European Union, the dreadful beast, with the papacy in it, in the middle of it. And papacy always comes up last, smelling like a rose. They get everybody else to fight against themselves, and they don't have to do the fighting. Well, we shouldn't do the fighting either. We should be neutral politically and seek God, and he will try to defend us and protect us. So that's the 6th place that the earthquake is implied in mighty angel that cries as a lion's roar. I think the 7th place we see it is in Revelation 11th chapter. It's implied when it says, "Rise, measure the temple, they that worship therein." And the earthquake will test our readiness at that point. And if we are like the servants in Luke 12, verse 36, "Be like men that wait for the Lord when he comes from the wedding and knocks, that they may open immediately." If we're that ready and open, we can be anointed. It says, "I will give power to my 2 witnesses for 1260 days." That's 3.5 years. And they have the power to shut the heavens and turn water to blood. That's the power of Moses and Elijah. And when they finish their testimony, the beast ascends to make war. And I believe that's the papacy in charge of the UN. And they will have the political force to compel everybody. You can't buy or sell unless you go along with their number, which is 666, which is the number on the Pope's hat. Vicarius Filii Dei is in Latin, adds up to 666. So beware. That's what we don't want. We don't want to be part of it, and we want to be out of here. And we'll talk about that more another time. But I would say get my book, The Earthquake and 7 Seals, on Amazon. It can help you understand how we make the covenant to be God's people in the end time. It's go to Amazon, type in my name, Ruhling, Ruhling, and scroll down through the books to The Earthquake and 7 Seals for what we need for God's protection. I hope you will, I don't get many people. I have had a few that call or write emails. My email is ruling7@juno.com, and if you have questions, be glad to talk with you or try to answer them. And it helps give content for here. I do have people that want me to read their material, and I want you to read mine. It's how we grow sometimes. And thank you for your interest in these topics. It really is present truth, I believe. It's, people want to talk about the gospel. Well, it's the gospel of the kingdom. And how do we get there? Kingdom means dominion of a king. And it's through his laws that he has dominion. The gospel in Noah's day was a boat. The gospel in Abraham's day was real estate. The gospel in Moses' day was the promised land and freedom from bondage. Christ came with a different gospel. In my Father's house are many mansions, and he came to forgive our sins. For us, the gospel is better than any of those because it's all of them. We get every important package in the past summates in the end time, and we can be there. And so please understand this as present truth and try to share it with others. The king sends his servants to bid people to a wedding. Are we his servants? Where's the wedding? Do they know? I think we're explaining it here on the covenant relationship, and it's the covenant that we must make, and we have to initiate it. Hey, running out of time. God bless you. Thank you for being with us. We'll see you again at the top.